Tonight on 2020.
Hey, I'm a PI. Did you murder these women? Let's sit down and have a cup of coffee. That wasn't going to happen.
So what did happen? 2020 on the hunt, but for a sun-bleached ladies' man or a lady killer?
They all felt like it was homicide, that she had been killed.
Felix Vale's first wife mysteriously drowned. 2 other women now missing for decades. But are there even more?
The problem was that we didn't have a body. Without a body, you really don't have a crime.
Tonight, 2020, in partnership with the Clarion Ledger USA Today Network, on the road and the river to investigate 3 cold cases decades old.
I look like my mom or am I me?
I was looking for any evidence I could find.
And they don't get any colder or stranger.
She opens the front door, and here comes this machete, just clank on the floor. Then another machete clanks on the floor. Oh, wow.
From the summer of love to the summer of now.
Felix, what happened to Mary? What about Sharon? Annette?
All the pieces of the puzzle, only now coming together. Home movies. What was really hidden in a padlocked attic?
Don't touch it, call the police.
A near-death recording.
And he said, I really did it. I really killed her.
And the mom turned private eye who tracks down the man in the middle.
I said, do you ever see her anymore? His eyes turned black. Boom. They turned black.
But are they the eyes of a killer?
Felix, did you murder those women?
The last one to see them.
Good evening, I'm Elizabeth Vargas. David is away on assignment. Tonight, what authorities say is one of the oldest cold cases ever to finally make it to trial. 53 years in the making, with lawyers actually in court today for a pretrial hearing. 1 dead woman and 2 missing, along with grief and questions that have never gone away. So in partnership with the Clarion Ledger USA Today Network, 2020 has just come back from 8 different states looking for those answers. Jim Avila kicks off our search in the dark, murky waters of the bayou.
On a boat, on a river, a man and a woman, husband and wife, gone fishing. That's the story. But night is coming and one of them is about to lose a life. So we're getting close here?
Yeah, we're getting close. This is about a mile from it.
Before this mystery ends, there will be 3 missing women. All last seen alive with the most unlucky of husbands. 3 lost women, forgotten, but for a fearless private eye in Texas.
I'm a hands-on girl, you know.
With a burr under her saddle and a recorder in her bra.
You've had a lot of women.
Yeah, I don't know.
A relentless reporter from Mississippi.
This is my lair. This is where I work on my computer and work on cold cases.
And a grieving mother who got a crazy idea and just could not let it go.
It just feels like this is my duty to make this happen.
The very first thing she asked me was, would you be interested in writing about a serial killer living in Mississippi? And I was kind of like, yeah.
Lake Charles, Louisiana, down by the Gulf of Mexico. Cajun country, Spanish moss, and long-legged egrets. A tale tangled as old fishing line, best unraveled by boat, cruising through a ship graveyard.
It's right up here on the right.
Our guide, investigative reporter Jerry Mitchell. He's already had a long career uncovering Old Testament evil in the Deep South. Stories like the Mississippi burning murders that led to the conviction of Klansmen.
There it is. This is it. Okay, this is where it is.
His latest work appears in the USA Today Network documentary series called Gone. It's about the case of Mary Horton Vale, haunting the Louisiana Delta since 1962. On the radio, Ray Charles Can't Stop Loving You.
I have directed that the following initial steps.
In the White House, President Kennedy on the brink of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And soaring somewhere high overhead, John Glenn, the first American in orbit. Back on Earth in Lake Charles, Mary Horton and Felix Vale have only just begun living the life. All smiles and home movies the dashing Felix sporting a fedora just a few months before it all went bad. Mary had been the high school homecoming queen in Eunice, Louisiana. Tiaras and parades. Her home movies reveal a real looker with Southern charm. One of her biggest admirers, Mary's little brother, Will Horton.
Mary was one of those people, when she walked into the room, she made everybody feel good.
She was kind of this larger-than-life girl that everybody loved.
She was a beauty for sure.
Yes.
Classmates and sorority sisters remember those college days at McNeese State with Mary like it was yesterday.
Not only pretty on the outside, but pretty on the inside. People really were drawn to her.
Felix works in a chemical plant, and he has plenty of chemistry after work, too.
Very nice-looking man.
Yeah, she just kind of fell in love from the get-go.
I had one woman tell me that Felix Vale looked like he'd been kissed by heaven. He had this charismatic aura.
Funny thing about Felix, though.
I think Felix was the bad boy.
Mary's friends say they didn't like him much. Can't remember why.
For some reason, we didn't care for him. I do remember that.
Now in the fall of '62, after a year of marriage, Mary and Felix have a baby, Billy, and some unexpected good news. And they thought, or she thought she was pregnant again?
She did. She thought she was pregnant again, told her friends she thought she was pregnant.
Were they happy at the beginning, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. The family was beginning to start, you know.
But behind those backyard smiles, something dark. One of her sorority sisters remembers a mysterious premonition.
I remember in the dorm that Mary had always told us she was going to die young by drowning. I've never forgotten that.
One Sunday evening, Felix gets the notion to take Mary fishing out on the river. They stay out late, past dark. Something until this day her brother says he can't figure out.
Can you tell me a little bit about the fear of the water?
You could go in a swimming pool. She was fine as long as she could see the bottom.
You call that dark water down here, right?
Dark water.
And that means you can't see through it.
And yet there's Mary. You can see her in your mind's eye all those years ago, dutifully cruising up that corkscrew of a river with Felix. Then Mary's fear comes tragically true. Felix describes a freak accident. He says Mary spots a stump in the water. He swerves to miss it, throwing her into the river.
She saw a stump, said something, he whipped the boat, she fell out. That was his story. And then he dove in the water and tried to save her, couldn't save her.
The young mother, so lively and loved, taken by the river, vanishing in that dark water of the Louisiana Delta. Gone. When we continue, police evidence photos missing for 50 years. Until Bulldog reporter Jerry Mitchell finds them.
Well, this is the autopsy report.
What they reveal about the disappearance of Mary Horton Vale as the search for justice begins. Hank Williams sang about jambalaya and crawfish pie and filet gumbo.
Jambalaya, crawfish pie, and filet gumbo.
But it's not all big fun on the bayou.
Well, this is the autopsy report of Mary Vale.
Investigative reporter Jerry Mitchell has been dredging up a secret that folks here in Lake Charles have been whispering about for a half-century. The death of Mary Horton Vale while out on a boat with her husband Felix in 1962. Ruled by the coroner an accidental death. But now it's all being reeled up through the depths of time into the daylight.
Did his friends and the people around believe the story that he had been out fishing?
The people I talked to didn't believe it. His neighbor, who was a fisherman, he was like, I never went fishing with Felix. He had a water skiing boat. He didn't have a fishing boat.
The local Lake Charles American press covering Mary's death, the search for her body, shadows of doubt falling on her husband even back then. Deputies said Felix had been unfaithful to Mary. Her brother Will Horton says she was ready to leave him.
Even though back then divorce was an ugly word to use and looked down upon. I think she was leaning strongly in that direction when she died.
With Mary lost in the river, you might think Felix would be frantic to find help. But deputies say he took the time to go miles downriver.
According to the deputy's report, he passed the lighted tugboat, didn't wave it, hey, I need help. My wife's just drowned. And there were other lighted places, but he went more than 5 miles all the way back to Lake Charles.
Before he said anything?
Yeah, before he sought help.
And then there was the life insurance, always the life insurance. 2 policies worth $500,000 in today's money. One taken out, paid in full, just months before. And then 2 days after she disappeared, Mary's body is recovered, still dressed in her sorority sweatshirt.
Where they found her body was about where her body went down. It's right up here on the right.
In his quest to find out what really happened to Mary, Mitchell discovers that most of the police records have vanished. In fact, the most important evidence in the case came from a civilian who was on one of the boats that found Mary's body. 2 gruesome photos.
These are photographs he had held on to for more than 50 years.
These photographs raise 1,000 questions. The odd positioning of the body, the existence of oil stains on her clothes. Experts later say it does not seem to fit with a drowning. And perhaps most importantly, the photos reveal something quite dramatic that to investigators today make Mary's death look less like an accident and more like a murder.
She has a scarf in her mouth, 4 inches into her mouth. And there's a bruise on the back of her head.
The theory of the deputies at the time was that Felix Vale may have hit his wife with an oar.
Mary's brother Will says Felix seemed to handle the catastrophe remarkably well.
If I'd have been in that situation, I'd have gone running to my wife's parents saying, "Oh, forgive me, please. I'm so sorry. I should have never put in that boat. It's all my fault." I never saw anything remotely similar to that from him at all. And that was the first warning sign, I guess you could say, that I saw.
Instead, what was his attitude?
He was somber, but he was silent.
Mary's sorority sister Judy Turney drove Felix to his wife's funeral.
He just seemed to be very flippant and not in mourning at all.
And here's something that still galls. Even after Felix collected insurance money, he failed to pay the funeral home.
He got money, enough to cover the funeral, and never put a penny towards the funeral. His own wife's funeral.
Felix was arrested for 3 days.
I think we all suspected Felix from the get-go.
The prosecutor brought the case to a grand jury, but then dropped it, and Felix Vale moved on with his life until his past and Jerry Mitchell caught up with him 50 years later, finding a damaging witness.
He just started talking here about out of the clear of blue about Mary and calling her his ex-wife and
Wesley Turnage. He says on the way to work one day, a year after Mary died, Felix told him something so bold and incriminating, investigators had to hear it for themselves.
he said, well, that damn wanted another baby. Thought it might help save our marriage, but said I didn't want the one I got and I sure didn't want another one. He said, I fixed that damn she won't never have another one. And right then I knew that I was sitting beside a murderer.
It wasn't just Wesley Turnage. Mitchell found other witnesses who say Felix Vale confided in them. The reporter led prosecutors to Robert Fremont, who befriended Vale in Southern California during the late 1960s.
He talked about something about a lake and a boat and, all this stuff, and, he killed his first wife. I thought it was maybe some kind of BS story, but the second time he told me, it was very graphic, and it really troubled me. What did he say? It sounded like he whacked her on the head and threw her in the water.
Unfortunately, neither man reported those conversations to police at the time, and Felix went on to marry again. What are the chances something suspicious might happen to his new wife? Stay with us. Meet Felix Vale's new wife. Look a little young? That's because she is. When Annette becomes Mrs. Vale, she's 17 years old. Her husband is more than twice her age.
This is your friend Annette, and here is your long-awaited tape. Hope you like it.
Annette is a headstrong, energetic teen who writes poetry, plays guitar, and sings.
How old is she about?
She's 15, I think, when she made this.
Annette, who had just lost her dad in a car crash, met Felix when she was just 15 years old. He was driving his motorcycle through her neighborhood and stopped to chat up the high school girl. Annette's mother, Mary Rose.
I didn't know enough about him to raise alarms, and I thought it was casual.
When Annette and Felix meet in Texas, she doesn't know a thing about what happened back under that dark water in Lake Charles, or the questions about Felix's first wife's death.
So what was the bond there between Felix and Annette?
It was almost like a father figure.
While Annette is away at an out-of-town special music school, Mom figures out it's her that's being played. Felix and Annette start out secretly dating and end up taking a cross-country adventure on his motorcycle.
By letting her go off with Felix is not something I'm proud of. And I trusted her, and I didn't know he was a bad guy.
But the man Mom says is a bad guy is about to take her daughter on a long trip through California and down to Central America. When Annette returns home 2 years later, it's without Felix. She tells Mom she's had a painful abortion, wants a divorce, and to move back in with her.
Annette's staying down here. We're making a room out of this garage.
Annette and Mary Rose are turning the garage into a bedroom for the married but separated teenager. She remembers her daughter telling her she had to bolt from Felix, her free spirit dominated by a much older man who was jealous and controlling.
I can't do anything without checking with Felix first.
Anything?
Anything.
After the room is finished, Annette says she needs what she calls silent therapy and isolates herself inside, talking to no one. Felix is calling on the phone repeatedly, but Mary will not let them speak.
I heard her singing, and I heard her crying, and she was just trying to get her life back together.
Sing songs of praise to the Spirit.
Annette tells her mom she will emerge soon, and when Felix hears that, he shows up.
It does seem as though he was trying to alienate your daughter from you, right?
Oh, well, it's very clear he did.
Now, everything spirals out of control. All three are living together, but soon Mary says Felix and her daughter all but demand she vacate the property. It was a house and a cottage Mary bought with her life insurance money, left to Annette when her dad died.
All of a sudden, Annette puts Felix on the deed with her. And then months after that, she actually deeds the house completely to Felix.
So Felix has his young wife back, a new house, money in the bank, left from Annette's life insurance payout. Time for another trip through the Midwest, but this time it's Annette who doesn't come back.
He said they were in St. Louis camping, and she decided to go back to Mexico and leave him. So he put her on a Trailways bus. That was it. That was his story.
Did that make sense to you?
No. But I wanted to believe it, and I wanted to believe that I would hear from her.
Years later, new owners head up to the attic of the house where Felix lived with Annette.
None of it looked very interesting to me except a suitcase back in that corner.
Inside, bathing suits, lingerie, and Annette's birth control pills, all left behind, even though Felix claimed she had run off to Mexico to have sex with other men.
Finding her birth control there convinced me that he had really done this, because what woman runs away and doesn't take her clothing or birth control with her? It seemed very suspicious to me.
There's a letter I wrote to the DA. They didn't respond, so.
For more than 20 years, Mary Rose goes to prosecutors, police, private eyes, even psychics, to try to turn her suspicions into a case against Felix Vale.
I never let go of hope that maybe, somebody would believe what I knew, to be true.
Nothing until 2010.
Well, let's go to Jerry Mitchell now.
That's when Mary heard dogged investigative reporter Jerry Mitchell interviewed on air.
The light went off and I just said, this is the man that's going to be interested in this story.
And he was polite.
He was polite. My approach was, if you knew that there was a serial killer living as a free man in Mississippi, would you like more information about it?
I was kind of like, yeah.
It was a match forged by mutual determination.
Hi, Jerry. It's Mary.
Mary's desperate sorrow, Jerry Mitchell's know-how.
I was going to Mississippi. I said, I'm going to confront Felix. Would you like to meet me there?
They link up in a field in remote northern Mississippi where Felix grew up. Mary's relentless sleuthing had led her to this trailer where Felix was now living. He wasn't home. But while Jerry waited outside, Mary, camera in hand, sees an opening.
The window was broken and he had plastic over the window, and I just ripped it right off and climbed in. I was looking for any evidence I could find.
So you're a 64-year-old woman.
Slithering through the back.
Determined.
Determined.
And the next thing I know, here comes this machete, just clank on the floor. And then another machete clanks on the floor, and then another one.
Yep, I just kept pulling them out. Yeah.
A machete collection. Jerry is more than intrigued now.
It was just like, oh, wow.
I don't know what the story is yet, but there's a story here.
There's a story here.
It's a story that features a first wife drowning suspiciously and a second underage bride's mysterious disappearance, both last seen alive by their husband Felix Vale. Are there others? Mary Rose will stop at nothing to find out.
And she said, oh, by the way, there was another woman that Felix was with, and I think her name was Sharon, she said.
Next, who is Sharon? And what deep, dark secret is Felix's son holding for 40 years? Stay with us.
2020 continues in partnership with the Clarion Ledger USA Today Network.
Felix Vale, suspected of murdering his first wife, is leaving the winding dark waters of the Louisiana Delta for a completely different lifestyle. In California. It's the late 60s, and Felix has decided to tune in and drop out. His young and now motherless son, Billy, says Dad is going through more girlfriends than I can count, eventually discovering a 21-year-old fresh face named Sharon Hensley. Her brother, Brian.
If anyone would describe her, the first word that comes out of their mouth is beautiful.
8-year-old Billy was obviously plenty for Felix to handle on his own. Kids didn't exactly mix with Daddy's hippie lifestyle. But Sharon is willing to help. A Midwestern beauty with the looks of a model, the legs of a dancer, and a wholesome North Dakota sensibility.
Oh yeah, she was very popular with the boys. She was dated the quarterback in high school.
But it all seemed to bore her. California beckoned. She met Felix at a party in San Francisco, totally changing her life. Neither had jobs or a home, hitchhiking the coast, stealing from orchards to eat, dropping acid. Young Billy is in tow.
He's not in school.
He's not in school.
He's wearing hardly any clothes, right?
Yeah, his only possessions are shorts and a sleeping bag. And so one day, basically the son marches to the police department and tells the police, my dad keeps giving me drugs and I don't want drugs.
This is National Enquirer, dated January 10th, 1971.
The story of a boy being fed drugs and little else makes the National Enquirer. And back in a North Dakota grocery checkout line, Brian Hensley spots it, and his sister Sharon's picture.
I said, hey, Mom, Sharon's in this paper here.
But one critical thing was not in that article. The boy told the police he heard a terrible revelation. His father confessing to Sharon, Dad had killed Billy's mom.
Bill was dismissed by the sheriffs there as just some crazy story.
Authorities from Calcasieu Parish, Louisiana, fly to California, but Felix isn't talking, and no murder charges are filed. Bill's widow, Janet.
He knew what he had heard, and he never wavered on that, never.
Janet Fail says before her husband died of cancer in 2009, he purposely left that story on a church podcast so others could hear it.
Can you share that story now?
Yeah, that's when I found out the truth of my mother's death.
He wanted the truth to come out here for the victims.
He didn't know I was even in the house. He said that he had murdered my mother. He said, "No, you don't understand. I really did kill her."
Now, Bill says he's afraid of his father, scared Felix might try to kill him because he told police what he heard. And that fear is spreading up to North Dakota, where the Hensley family believes Sharon is in danger.
I really believe because he had confessed to her that he'd made a decision that he had to get rid of her.
Brian Hensley and his mother saw Sharon and Felix only one more time. His sister had wasted away from bad nutrition and drugs, and Felix, he remembers, was in total control of her life.
At that point, I believe she was with him out of fear. She didn't know how to get out of the situation.
Sharon told her parents they were hitting the road, maybe heading to South America. She later sent this photo captioned, "Making travel plans." But the family saw no excitement in her eyes, only sadness. They get one last phone call.
When my mom got off the phone, she told my dad, "Sharon's in deep trouble. She's crying out for help."
But they didn't know exactly where she was. They didn't know how to help, and never heard from Sharon again. If you're counting, that makes 3 young women gone, last seen alive with Felix. His story about Sharon's disappearance spelled out in a letter to her family, a letter that makes as much sense as the acid trips he likes to take.
I haven't seen Sharon. Last I saw her was about a year ago. We were down in Key West.
Remember, Felix told Annette's mother she disappeared on a bus. This time it's Sharon, and his story is she left on a boat with mysterious Australian strangers.
I remember plainly, clearly, just like, oh my God, this is such BS.
There was no investigation. When Felix returns home alone, his son Bill says Dad tells him another chilling story.
He said she would never bother anyone ever again. And I knew what that meant. I knew that he had murdered her.
The grown-up Bill said he didn't know what to do with this information. But when we return, someone who did. Another woman enters the story wearing a wire.
And then I just come in and stick it right here in my bra.
Face to face with Felix. Stay with us. Texas private eye Gina Frenzel just can't pass up a good murder mystery. Her favorite author is John Grisham. When one night she stumbles onto Jerry Mitchell's ebook, Gone. It's just 99 cents on her Kindle, and she bought the ride of her life.
I thought, well, nobody just disappears.
She's part super sleuth, a la Melissa McCarthy in Spy.
Nancy, I know, but I'm in deep and I'm getting such good intel.
Part superhero, at least if you go by her nickname, Batgirl, a moniker earned after she showed up at a Halloween party and didn't get the memo.
I was the only one that dressed up. I dressed up as Batgirl. So it's just a fun little thing
And do people call you that now all the time?
Not all the time. I can't get away from it.
And you even wear a necklace?
I do.
Her specialty, getting people to talk. Gina offered to help Jerry Mitchell with his story, and the fact that Felix Vail hadn't talked to anyone in years didn't dissuade her. When she finds out he lives just an hour and a half away, the keys are in the car, whether he likes it or not.
When it comes to finding out the truth, I'm not worried about a trespassing citation.
And she's dressed for success.
You weren't wearing the normal clothes you wear.
No, I wasn't. I was wearing a black sundress, and it was very low cut. And then, of course, I have to wear it in front of a suspected serial killer,
Right.
But it probably didn't hurt.
This lot here is where he lived, right?
Felix is living in a shack with no running water. Years earlier, before he lived there, there'd been a suspicious fire. Gina uses that fact to her advantage.
I knew I couldn't walk up to Felix and say, hey, I'm a PI. Did you murder these women? Let's sit down and have a cup of coffee. That wasn't going to happen. I'm going to tell him I am hired by an insurance company to investigate this fire. And that's going to get me in his door. And I knocked on his door. He looked a little put off at first, and then I told him why I was there. And then he was perfectly fine to come out and walk around with me.
In her ruse of investigating the fire, she takes these photos, including a rare image of Felix in his 70s. She says he's been living like a hermit.
He said, well, I'm gonna come inside. And I was like, okay. And of course, I'm immediately, where can I get out? And there was no place to get out. There's this big plastic Rubbermaid tote. And on top of it's a little toolbox, and there's a hacksaw and a hammer right on top of it. And that's all that's going through my mind was, holy crap.
20 minutes later, Gina excuses herself and is out the door. But she's laid the groundwork, and 1 week later, she's back.
Heart beating a little bit that time?
Yeah.
What are you worried about?
Well, I was nervous for my safety because I was going to try to get a little more in-depth in conversation with him and engage him.
This time, she gets a warm welcome.
He comes out, comes around, and as soon as he saw me, he just lit up. He was grinning and genuinely happy to see me. And unlocks.
So then you know you're in.
I knew.
Gina tells him she needs to take more photographs, but he has no clue she's got her audio recorder rolling too.
You also hide your recorder.
Yes.
In a very interesting place.
I just come in and stick it right here in my bra. Ready to go.
You can't see it.
You can't see it. You don't know it's there. I know it's there.
They speak for the next 6 hours, sipping wine in the small room with no bathroom. And there's another problem.
He had some wicked BO, so you just hope you don't hurl.
Felix thinks he's made a new friend, maybe more, and starts spinning long-winded stories about his philosophy of life.
As long as your ego is the main power in your brain, it is not going to let the spirit have equal power, equal time, anything.
I mean, he's crazy, but nothing makes sense, you know?
She says she's bored stiff, but feigns interest in order to gather the clues.
He has in his mind that he is the perfect specimen of a human being. I thought to myself, if I play off of that mentality...
I'll be honest with you, I like talking to you. I'm fascinated by this whole ego, you know, and understanding it.
Gina gets him to open up, but he never directly confesses to anything. No smoking gun. The most telling tidbit, she says, is this one, when he seems to admit he knows a lot about killing.
He didn't know how much I know about killing myself, you know, about killing people.
Yeah, that was pretty
Strong, huh?
interesting.
So your eyes must have lit up at that point.
A little bit, yeah.
Another alarming moment when Gina asks him about a woman he's been discussing at length. He won't name her, but she thinks it's the still missing Annette.
I said, do you ever see her anymore? And man, his body language completely changed. His color went. He stepped towards me and his eyes turned black, and it was all instant. Man, I hit a nerve. Felix tells Gina that he's been with hundreds of women, but it's been a while, a situation he seems bent on curing. I was worried that I could only take it so far without him ready to jump in the sack. There would be one time I made one statement and he thought, oh, let's have sex. And he goes, you want to have sex? I mean, he's ready to get up, and I'm like, whoa, wait, I don't know you that well.
He, in fact, thinks you were his girlfriend at some point.
Yeah. But I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what the hell you think's going to happen, but it ain't.
Gina visits Felix 4 times. No physical contact, except for their goodbyes.
He hugged me, and I thought, oh, crap. And it caught me off guard because I'm worried about my recorder right here. And he was feeling up my back, not like super pervy, but a little on the pervy side. And I was like, whatever. You can cop a feel if you want, but that's all you're getting, you know? He never said a word. He just wanted to cop a feel. And I was just like, you panicked for nothing.
That unbroken trust proves important later when Felix asks Gina to do some chores for him in his house when he's not there. It's a perfect opportunity to snoop, and Batgirl the Private Eye Gina takes it, and oddly finds this collection of women's earrings.
Why would a 76-year-old man have women's earrings?
Yeah, he's probably got 13, 14 pairs of earrings there. Kind of makes you wonder, whose were they and why does he keep them?
And she makes another discovery, a bin filled with more than 20 journals.
That was the Rubbermaid tub where I found the journals.
Eureka.
Yeah, definitely.
Gina meticulously takes more than 2,000 photographs, documenting every page. There's no huge clue here, except when he writes about how a breakup with yet another woman he dated changed his thoughts on killing.
I was altered by it in a positive enough way to enable me to handle, without murder, the upcoming debacle.
Could be interpreted that he's saying that he's murdered before.
Right.
This is the ex-girlfriend. Her name is Beth Field. She's relieved to have lived to tell her story. She met Felix in the late 80s after Annette went missing. She was immediately attracted to him.
It wasn't just the blue eyes. He kept his body in really good shape, and he was a sexy man, really a gorgeous man.
But, she says, out of the blue one day, he became violent.
And he just turned around and started hitting me. He actually broke my eardrum. He hurt me.
So did Felix hurt other women too? Jerry Mitchell and Mary Rose have spent years trying to find out. He's written article after article, pushing authorities to act. The current coroner re-examined the autopsy and those lost photos of Mary Horton Vale's body. And after 50 years, he ruled it was not accidental drowning, it was homicide. Prosecutors now feel they have enough for a case. They have Felix's old friends.
He said, I fixed that damn.
His own son.
He said, no, you don't understand. I really did kill her.
Next, this cold case finally catches fire, and the police are closing in. Is this the end of the road for Felix Vale?
I had this phone call from the sheriff's office.
I hooped and hollered and danced like I've never danced before.
Stay with us. At his hermit hideout in Canyon Lake, Texas, Felix Vale has no idea police are about to arrest him. Gina is there too, interrupting her spa weekend. Never mind the manicure, Gina wants to watch Felix get nailed.
I had the best spot. Cops were pissed. They didn't like that at all. And I'm like, you know what? You snooze, you lose. I got here first.
She and the cops follow him to the post office, where he's arrested in the parking lot.
I had my big camera, and I'm just snapping away.
What happened to Sharon and Annette?
And he looks right at me. And I thought, well, he saw me. He knows it's me. Big deal. Game over.
Felix, did you murder those women?
Jerry called me and said they got him. I hooped and hollered and danced like I've never danced before.
Today, he sits in the Calcasieu Parish Jail awaiting trial on charges of second-degree murder. And although Felix Vale is accused only of killing his wife, Mary, the disappearance of his companion, Sharon Hensley, and his wife, Annette, loom large.
The thing that all three women have in common is the fact they were all last with Felix Vale.
I know of no other circumstance or no other occasion anywhere where this has happened.
District Attorney John DeRosier says the fact that the Louisiana Supreme Court will allow the disappearances of these two other women as evidence in this trial is highly unusual.
So this is a cold case, pretty much been put to bed and closed. Why do you believe this case can still be successful?
Time is a double-edged sword sometimes. Witnesses disappear. Witnesses die. It works to the benefit of a defendant. However, in this case, over a period of 50 years, people tend to talk.
Do we know the whole story about Felix?
That's the big question for me. If he is guilty of these women's murders, are there others? Are there other women or other people that disappeared too?
Felix pled not guilty, and his attorneys say he didn't commit these crimes or any other.